Thank you, everyone. So this is the online panel discussion. Today, the topic is data democratization, making data available and understandable across the organization. My name is Nika. I will be moderating this section. I'm very, very excited. We have 4 experts. We have 4 fantastic, very, very senior people from CEO, presidents, SVPs. It's super fantastic to be here. My background is in data science, so I have a PhD in machine learning, and I have been doing AI product management at Google for over 7-8 years now, so I'm particularly excited for this section. So now I would like to start off with some introductions. Please tell us who you are and what products you're currently working on. And then we have compiled a set of questions to steer the conversation, but please feel free to ask questions to each other. This is going to be a great discussion. So with that said, Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Marilee. Adam Dille, I lead R&D at Quantometric, and at Quantometric, R&D is a cross-functional group of product and engineering folks together, and really just think of this point in my career as such a treat and a privilege to be able to work with a group that it's kind of spans across that, everything from research to design, product management, engineering, delivery to production. It's really, really fun to get to work across that entire spectrum. Products that we're working on, there's always so much going on at Quantum, but something I think that's been really exciting for me has been seeing that role of data science. You mentioned it yourself, the role that data science has played in kind of moving analytics forward. For us, for me, I'm an engineer by trade and by background, and so taking this field that I know very little about, honestly, and learning more about it, and then really, most importantly, seeing how that has turned analytics kind of on its head and added new value that no one ever thought we'd be able to add through traditional engineering methods has been really a treat for me to see that unravel at Quantum. So yeah, nice to be here.
Great, thank you, Adam. It's great to have you here. Aurimas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Aurimas. I'm the president at Debridge, and we're a product design and development company. And one of the aspects that I wanted to bring to this discussion is in the way that we use product metrics in product development, and also in the way that we use product metrics and transparency in our own company to run the business. So, and we can come back to this, but we essentially have a completely open sourced set of metrics, from revenue to profitability to utilization, employee engagement, and everything else. And we broadcast that back in our organization to incentivize ownership and engagement.
This is very interesting. I was reading an article by Harvard Review, I think it was published in 2017, saying, hey, if your company is not good at analytics, it's not ready for AI. So it's great to see that such services exist in order to make sure companies are going to be AI ready, or they're actively going to be enabling AI solutions. Eric, let's go next.
Yeah, I'm Eric Ashby, head of product at Helpshift. What we build is we build digital customer service for in-app mobile applications. And we currently have, we actually provide customer service on over 3 billion devices worldwide right now. And so we have this huge user base that's out there. And it's interesting because when we look at data, we look at, how do we use it internally to improve our product? How do we use it to drive our engineering? But we also use it for how can customers use it, the data that we collect for them as they provide customer service at that time when the customer really is at this critical moment of need. How can you use then this information to then give some great experiences? And that's where I think some of the, the making the data available at that point is so critical.
Yeah, definitely. This is fantastic. And last but not least, Roman.
Hi, Roman Stanek, founder, CEO of Good Data. And we believe that behind every AI strategy, there is a good data strategy. And our vision is to really make data available to any process, any person, any decision. And today, there are multiple ways how to produce data in any enterprise. And our vision is to essentially decouple the BI stack and create a single source of metrics so that any application, any process can actually have access to a single source of truth, and then make it visualized, available, and so on in a completely pervasive way.
Thank you. So in order to kick off the discussion, I have a couple of questions. My first question for everyone is, in order for a company to become data-driven and make informed decisions, what would you say are some key factors that would actually need to be considered? I think this is of interest to everyone, and especially companies that are trying to pivot into the data and analytics field.
I'm going to just jump in right on this. I'll just say a couple of things right up front, but this is a really great question ahead. This comes up all the time, either when working with customers or even internally. I hear I have questions like, oh, should we collect this, or should we collect that, or do we need this? And what I've actually found is that it's not about the data, it's about the question. And that's really when you think about what you're doing, you really need to understand what are the questions that you're looking at. And if you're looking at, say, for example, trying to improve your product, then you're looking at the customer journey and what are the questions that you want to know in that customer journey. And then that will then drive the data that you then need to collect to answer those questions. And then the other thing that I find that's really common is that they treat it like, okay, if we have this data, then we'll have the answer. A lot of the times this data is like mining for oil or for gold. You'll know that there's some good, rich information in there, but until you actually get in and start to open it up and consume it, then you'll really understand that value. And so for me, it's really about understanding what's the question, what's the customer life cycle that you're using, and then being willing to use the tools to go in and do that mining to find that gold. And you may be surprised what you find as you get in there. And so, that's kind of the approach that I would recommend. But I'd love to hear some more, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, I can go next. That's the sequence on my screen, so might as well. Sorry.
No, go for it.
It's probably different on other screens though, isn't it? But just to build on top of what you were saying, we look at it usually when we talk to our clients, we look at it from a client perspective and from an objective or a goal perspective. So we don't start with the data, but we say if we can look at the goals and if we can say that, if we can specify the goals as being specific, measurable, and achievable, and then we always look for those three conditions around the goal: specific, measurable, achievable. And if we can set that up, then we can always look back at the metrics or the specifics that we need to track within the product. And that could be achieved through Mixpanel or Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, whatever the technology that you want to pick. But we always work from goal down to the metric or the data that you need to observe.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, I couldn't agree more with your point. Like everyone has a job to be done, right? And a problem to solve, but it's so easy sometimes to get caught up in, my job is to just gather data. and so you lose sight of the fact that you were just trying to solve some kind of problem in the first place. But if you focus on that use case, then, a lot of times you end up needing to gather less data to solve the problem in the first place. So save yourself time and you focus on that problem you're trying to solve.
Gartner just recently announced that in a typical fashion that by 2025, 70% of companies will move away from big data to small and wide data. And it actually makes sense what we just said is that big data, context is king, and there is no context in big data. So move to wide and small data and focus on agility. What is it that I can actually find data today, and how can I actually improve the processes? That's going to be the major shift away from just storing data just in case, making it just in time.
These were great answers. I think you approached this question like a product management problem, where the first question and the answer needs to be, who is the user? What is the goal? And it's great, right? So it's not just about making the company data-driven. We need to have a reason. We need to have a persona. And sometimes the persona can be internal consuming, right? For internal customers. So this is really great. Okay, so we talked about how to make companies more data-driven. Now let's talk a bit about how do you think we can change the makeup of the current analytics team of a company to support self-serving non-specialists? And I think this is a very good question. For example, what skills will be most in demand?
Yeah. When I think of self-service, my mind immediately goes to complexity. Analytics can be a very complex problem. You know, some of the things we're solving for our customers, you know, goes multiple levels deep on a data hierarchy down to on a page level, what are different audiences experiencing? That is a complex thing to solve. And so when you put a product in front of someone that displays all this data, the first thing I think about for self-service is, are you giving them a tool that they can easily go from zero to understanding and solving the problem we just talked about that they have? And if they don't have that, then I think that's what's driven some of these traditional analytics teams that are, you know, we're the guardians of the data. When you have a question, you come to us and we'll put you on our list and get your insight back to you when it works for our schedule. But self-service means you have something available that's going to let you solve that problem without needing to go to that team who's been that bearer of the data traditionally.
Aurimas, I think you have something to say.
Just click the button. You read my mind. Yeah, I mean, we run into, right, in context of self-service, we run into a lot of issues with lack of recency in the typical enterprise, because everyone's running ETLs and the data is never in a shape or format to actually be consumed by self-service, right? And so there's always like this massive technical debt that exists in the organization to get to the state of being able to consume it or provide self-service. So I think there's an immense amount of work that needs to be done in just moving the industry towards a more streaming oriented approach where most of the data can be streamed and event driven, and then self-service based off of event feeds becomes much more realistic, and the insight can be much more timely for the business to make the right decisions, as opposed to like what I see right now in the industry is it's always retroactive. You look at the analytics in a retroactive fashion of what happened over the course of the last month or 2 months, and maybe sometimes it's lagging by 3 months, right? So yeah, we've got 2020 going backwards, but so what, right? Can we actively plan our business looking at active current data?
You know, you bring up a great point. So maybe the next question can be around, hey, how can the stakeholders actually be on board and understand the future state rather than the current state? What are some best practices that you've seen at your companies? Any insights at all?
Yeah, it always starts with, I actually think that one of the biggest problems that we see is, and especially in larger companies, are organizational silos. That you actually, instead of having organization that supports data-driven decisions, you have multiple organizations. You have a BI team, an ML team, and a data science team, and data ops team, and so on. So, and so historically, people blame lack of data on data silos, but I actually think going forward, we will actually have to restructure how we actually organize organizations so that we can make decisions. And from my perspective, it all starts with having a set of metrics or components that everyone can actually use to and agree on, and then we need to give people the kind of the flexibility of business innovation. So IT or no one should be actually telling people how to build a report, but we should be able telling them this is how we define certain metrics, and there should be some sort of agreement on it. Otherwise, everyone will end up with different data, and that leads to lack of trust.
Yeah, I was gonna say on this one, for me, it comes down to what is kind of the core data model that's driving your company. Yeah. And does everybody understand that data model? And surprisingly, when I work with when we work with companies, and also internally for us, we had to go through this, is like, what is that model that drives us? And then once kind of everybody gets that, it's almost as important as understand the product. Like, what is the structure of this data? Once people get that and they understand that, then it's really easy to talk about, okay, now how do we then use this to answer questions? But what are we going to do with this in the future? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to take this? And what's that's going to look like? I really like the comments that was made about also moving this to streaming. So we're not talking about historical. We're talking about like what's going on right now. But it still comes down to that model and that understanding that we have, and that model, of course, is based on what our business goals. What are the things that we have. And so so I think having that model is just so critical.
Yeah.
I
One more
also
thing I
think-
want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go.
I was
Go
just
for it.
gonna say-
I went first before. You go now.
I was going to say, when you say current state, it's hard to ignore the fact that that term brings, like, these are people who have done something successfully for some period of time in their career, and they've got their niche and way of doing things that means success today. And to move someone out of that toward a future state that you're talking about, you have to understand that you're talking about their jobs and their livelihoods and the things that make them successful today. I think you have to also make people feel kind of safe in what that future state is going to look like, so they can see themselves in it. They can see where their success is gonna land in that future state, and then they can easily kind of buy in on a culture of, we're going to move ourselves to something that doesn't look like the way it does today.
Yeah. So very much in line, right? I was thinking the same. What we find is when we work with clients at Debridge, and we think about a shift in organizational structure, in skill set, in people, right? Because that's if you want to really adopt a data-driven mindset, you need to be comfortable with being transparent and open with the data that you share in the company. If you want to be open and transparent, you need to trust the people with the data, and you need to be safe enough so that someone doesn't challenge, well, why is, you could challenge someone on compensation, you could challenge someone on what the profitability of the business is being used for, and so on and so forth. All of these questions surface. I have an anecdote that I'll share to illustrate the point. One of the kind of the best practices that we've implemented in the business is we do 2 events a year, and in the event, like a company all hands event, we do an open Q&A, an anonymous open Q&A. And so we have 600 people in essentially a room, and everyone's posting anonymously to a board where you can upvote individual questions, and we publish all of our data inside the company. So all of the content is available: financials, hiring, turnover, essentially all of the KPIs of a business. And the questions that pop up on that board, they're not comfortable questions. Talking about culture and adoption of open metrics, one of the fundamental things that really needs to be put in place is the people and the culture, right? The values that the company lives, they need to support that open-ended, data-driven mindset for it to work, for it to become sticky.
Yeah, if I may, I really want to agree and support what Eric said about that kind of agreement on the model, because I actually think that's usually the missing abstraction in any company. If you look at it, if we all share data, there's no abstraction, and we can interpret it 100 different ways. If we share charts and reports and so on, it's already too fixed. There's no self-service. So I actually do believe that a kind of fundamental agreement on what's the data model of our company and how do we actually understand that model, that's the starting point for anything, for data quality, for data self-service, understanding, alignment, and so on.
Yeah. And it's a concept that once the business or once the company gets it, they're like, oh, wait a second, now I see the value of this, because often they'll value the reports. They'll be like, oh, this is really important report. And you're like, no, it's actually the model. The model is what's important. As soon as they get it, that it transforms everybody, because then they're like, oh, I can use this model. I can go do this. I can go do that. I can go do this. So yeah.
Thank you for these points. I'd like to go to Aurimas and touch a bit more on the transparency part that you mentioned. So how would transparency and access play into the services that you provide your clients during the product development? So I'd love to hear thoughts, about like tools and metrics, any thoughts you have.
Yeah, so as we grew as a business over the last 12 years, and as we worked with more and more clients, what we realized was that kind of bringing complete transparency into product development incentivizes the right types of behaviors, right? So you want people to take ownership, you want people to align around a product idea, because if you can do that, the product is going to be much more successful, and the direction in which it moves is going to be more successful. When we talk about product development, we typically track 3 types of metrics, and we have a proprietary set of tools called Debridge Apollo that we use to then report all of those metrics to our clients through mobile applications, web interfaces, whatever. But we look at 3 things. When we look at a product, we look at quality metrics, product metrics, and delivery metrics. And so quality, fundamental product development quality stuff is like, defect monitoring, escape defects, caught defects, resiliency, ability to recover, scalability, et cetera, et cetera. We look at product metrics. Product metrics we covered, I think, when we started the conversation. That's more like business-oriented metrics, so outcomes for product. So is the hospital able to schedule all the doctor shifts that they want to schedule in a particular day? That would be a product metric for a software system. And then we look at delivery metrics, and then we, throughout our Apollo command, we actually broadcast all of the delivery metrics down to individual time entries of engineers and designers and product managers logging their time. And then we aggregate that all the way to epics, and even so epic estimates on the product. So we look at activity metrics all the way to product and quality metrics, and we aggregate, velocity, rolling, burn up, burn down, all of that. So, and that cohesive full set of metrics across quality, product, and delivery is something that we actively report on any product development effort that we're in. We haven't really seen anyone go to that level of depth and sides of development as well.
I was going to say, this sounds very sophisticated. It's great and very informative. Adam, I have a couple of questions for you. I'd love to hear your take. Have you ever tackled democratization challenges in order to ensure alignment and customer benefit?
Yeah, it's funny because we just happen to be in Oregon, a product that preaches the value of data democratization. I think Roman mentioned in the exact words that we use, data silos, and he mentioned the idea of a single version of the truth. Those things are very important to the product that we create. So it's all about gathering this very wide and deep first-party data set, but then allowing different personas to see that data through the lens of what matters to them. So your technical audience can look at performance data and how that impacts the business. Your very customer-oriented audience can look at VOC feedback and how that applies to things like conversion rate. But that single version of the truth is kind of the data model that Eric was talking about, where you get quickly past the arguments of, my tool says the data is this, and my tool says the data is this. You can't even get to the point of analyzing and solving some kind of problem because you just can't get past the fact that your data doesn't agree. So we preach that that data democratization has to cross all teams. But even with that being our own message, we've been really intentional internally within our own company about kind of practicing what we preach and just oversharing the data insights that we're coming up with on our own product within monthly all hands and product update meetings, to just drive that culture of like, this is the way that we derive success. We're not just building a product and guessing that this is going to be something that makes Quantum successful. It's going to be something that we come up with a hypothesis. We have data that's going to measure that. We build the thing, then we throw it out there, and we measure whether we were successful or not. And then we're going to share with all of you whether we were or not.
Yeah, this is a great point, to embedding this notion and mindset in the culture of the company, right? Whether it's good or bad, I couldn't agree more. Eric, what would be your take? How can data impact change the course of customer service?
Well, I think when I think about customer service is actually a really unique position in the customer journey. The customer has a lot of parts of the journey. They onboard, they'll use you, but when you have customer service, the customer is actually raising their hand and saying, "Would somebody please help me out?" And you now have an opportunity to make them a champion or to make them go away right at that moment. And so it's so critical that every move that you make during customer service is perfect. And so often customer service has one thing they know about you. They know your email when you send in an email. And to think about nowadays with all of the data, especially if you do something like an in-app customer service, you can know who the person is, you can know what they're coming in for, and you can know what the outcome is. And you can start to trend on that. You can see like, these are the most common things that people are coming in when they're doing this type of operation. And we know that if we act this way, this will be the highest type of outcome that we have. And so you can start build your systems around making sure that every time someone raises their hand at this point, you can give them a unique, perfect, great experience. But it comes back to making sure that you have the data model in place so that you can recognize that you're like, look, I recognize that you're a VIP. I recognize that you're coming in because you just purchased. So you probably have a question about your purchase. I'm going to make sure that I give you a perfect experience about that. And data allows you to drive that and drive that seamlessly. But that's really where I think, I'm so excited about kind of this panel and all of this, because if you can do that live, real time, it just creates an amazing experience for the customers right at that critical junction in their journey. So there's definitely a lot that can be done here, but it's all about getting it, kind of getting it set up right from the start.
It's funny you mentioned this. I was returning an item I bought from a very well-known chain of clothes, and they wouldn't accept the return. I don't even know why. And I spent so much money on that particular company. So I had to tell them, it sounds awful, but I said, do you know who I am? Do you know how much I've spent? Do you know, like, I have all these royalty, And they said, oh, just a second, we're going to look up your account. And they manually were pulling some data, and they said, oh yeah, you're a preferred customer. And I said, you should know this by me calling my phone number, right? So I hear you. User experience.
That is a great example. It's where taking the data, because the data's there, but using it correctly at the right time to make an amazing experience. Because had they done that, you would be like, I love this company. I absolutely love this company. Maybe I didn't like the product that I got, but I love this company and I'm going to be back again. So.
Or I think Delta Airlines, I called to change my flight, and just from the call, they said, hey, your name is Marilyn Nika, here's your flight. Is this in regard to your flight? So I skipped past providing my name and my boarding pass and Roman, I want to go to you now, and I have a question. So I'd love to hear, what is your concept of data as a service, and how does that support democratization of data and analytics? I'd love your take. And you're actually muted, Roman. So if you can unmute, thanks.
Yep. Yeah, I actually believe that this whole panel is essentially kind of about the dream of data as a service. We all want to have real-time data, streaming data available as a service. And so that's what we do as a company. And the best example, I think, it's somewhere between what Eric said and what Aurimas said is, once you take that model and publish it as a set of APIs so that anyone can actually query that model at any level of granularity, any metric, and get that alignment, that's our vision as data as a service. And so when Aurimas was kind of talking about the metrics they have and how they actually aggregate them, how you can actually see them, think about the number of permutations that it creates. And these are just product metrics. And you could have 10 times as many metrics for the rest of the company. And yet no one does it this way. We all export data, put it into some visualization tool or some dedicated tool like Apollo and so on. So having like that kind of open infrastructure that allows us to create these kind of model and data as an API, and being able to access it in real time from any tool, any device, and by any decision and so on in CRM or help desk or product decision. That's our vision as data as a service. And unfortunately, as an industry, we are still far away from that. We are still stuck in these kind of monolithic tools where you buy a tool and there's a model in it, there's a UI in it, there's no API. So, that's kind of the disruption we are actually where we are innovating.
Thank you. I think I have a question for all the panel, which is, I think we should touch a bit about data governance and privacy and in purview of data democratization. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know this topic can go in a lot of places, but I'd love your succinct thoughts on it. So if you want to go first, Adam, I see you're smiling, so let's go with you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and a common objection, almost like that feels at odds with data democratization. It's like, but what about this category of data in there? And I think when I think about, because I'm often thinking from the customer experience standpoint, using data to figure out how to create a better customer experience, 99.9% of the time, you shouldn't need to know who the person is to figure out whether this category of user or this specific user encountered some kind of friction and kept them from getting to the end goal that you've built this whole experience for in the first place. And so I think it's important, yes, to have data democratization, but to also think about user privacy while you're going throughout that journey of democratizing that data. So I think really important to, remove PII, to encrypt end-to-end the things that are going to be sensitive data within these data sets, and make sure that they are reserved for only the cases where they're really necessary. Things like customer service are a good use case for personally identifiable information. If you don't have it, then you can't make that connection to Marilee is the one calling in and she had this problem. So there are cases where you need it, but I think you got to figure out, what are we trying to do with the data? Again, back to solving the first problem. And if it's something like figuring out where these aggregate groups of users are having a problem on your experience and making it better, you don't need to know who they are.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, right, we're dealing, so I'm in the US now, and I'm Lithuanian. I was born in Lithuania, but I live in the US. And in the United States, because of privacy, we do not have a centralized electronic medical health record. So it's split across a variety of systems, right? Northwestern has a whole set of identity for me, and there's my vaccination data is with Northwestern, which is fine. It's protecting my privacy, I suppose. At the same time, I'm looking at the vaccine rollout in Lithuania, even though they're kind of slow, and they're, US bought a bunch of them, and so they're able to distribute them faster. But in Lithuania, they're able to electronically check whether an individual has been vaccinated. And for the sake of dealing with a pandemic, outside of any political opinions about whether you should get vaccinated or not, and whether it's necessary, but they're able to very quickly identify whether an individual is vaccinated through a mobile application that is private, but at least they can identify or look for that identifier and automatically provide certain services or provide certain elimination of restrictions for that individual that has received the vaccine. Now, again, it's a politicized topic, but when talking about privacy and security, I think there are even use cases where we should be more aggressive in collecting and centralizing that data, because it does allow our society to make certain good decisions, right? If we're able to administer it properly.
I see two problems with data kind of self-service and governance. And the first one is that today, most of the data kind of value chain is based on notion of copying data. I have data in my data warehouse. I will copy it into staging server. I will copy it into my training model. I will copy it into my desktop visualization tool. So any PII that's copied 100 times over, and these regulations are changing, no one can tell you where the data is and what it actually means. So first of all, we have to kind of stop copying data, and we have to go into some sort of in-place manipulation. And that's what's happening. That's data in the cloud is actually based on a different paradigm. The second problem is what Adam said about PII and removing PII. Again, I will sound like a broken record. If you have a semantic model of that data, if you know what semantically it means, you can actually do that governance, because you know this is PII and this is actually who's the user and what are they supposed to see and what they are allowed to see. So you can actually do some sort of a just-in-time governance. And so I don't believe it's possible, again, with the current way how we actually approach data, how we actually copy data for consumption. I think it's a governance nightmare, and it's a ticking time bomb.
When I look at this, I have three pivots on this. One, the user always owns their information. Two, no matter what tool you use, we have to protect that. We have to protect them. We have to protect, that data, whether we collect PII or not. If ideally we don't, but there are some scenarios, as Adam points out, we have to do that. And three, we have to navigate the political landscape across the world. We work in China, we work in Germany, we work in France, we work in the US, we work in South America, we work in Brazil, we work we work everywhere. And so we have all of this. And so we have these three responsibilities. And as we build our tools, what our job is to do is to make sure that, when we're talking about how do we make the data self-serviceable, the tools need to be able to account for this so that all of the people, all of the employees, everybody, they don't have to worry about these because it's built into the tool set. We've thought about, we either built it into the model, we built it into our reports as we built it into that. And so that's where, this is where the analytics team comes in, and the political arena is giving them plenty of work to do over the next, forever, making sure. But that's really, for me, those three core things that we have to navigate as an industry. And if we navigate it rightly, we will earn the trust to do what we need to do around analytics. And so that's kind of how I take a look at it. But to me, it just comes down to those three. But there's work here, which is great. Like, love it. Like, there's definitely work here for us to navigate.
Exactly. So, my takeaway is that the relationship between data democratization, reality means that there's a lot of complexity that needs to be simplified. I know that companies are taking steps in order to make this a bit better and a bit simpler. So with that said, I think we're coming towards the end of the panel, and I'd love to thank you all for your thoughtful answers. But with that said, I'd love to give a moment for each one of you to share some takeaways for the audience. I think we covered a lot today, and we can tell that your companies are very much invested in this topic. But yeah, if you have a couple of takeaways, that'd be great. Let's start with Adam.
Yeah, I think back to that point we made about data silos and culture change and people kind of working in the way that we have for a long time. And I would just say, I would just reiterate that it's so worth making a change. It's worth making a culture change and driving your people and incentivizing your people even to get to this place where we are open with data. We're able to quickly go from what you need and your given role to the data that you need to do that job better without going through 10 steps in a separate team. And so I would just really encourage people to build that culture, to make that change. We've seen so many organizations, really speed is I think the biggest thing that comes out of making a culture change is people get to the insights that they need quicker to do their job better, and speed and iteration is such a huge differentiator these days in software. And if you can move fast, then you're ahead of your competition, and people can move much faster when they have the data in their own hands as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Yes, for sure. Culture is very, very important. Culture and also diversity is very, very important in the company, because that's the way for a culture to get shaped, by having a diverse talent in there. Aurimas, would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure thing. Yeah, I was jotting down notes, but I see data and insight as an artifact of steps that you need to implement and changes in organization that you need to take on, as Adam was saying, where we always, when we think about services and when we think about digital products and digital product capabilities, we always say, if you want to change, if you want to make the business product centric, you need people, process, tooling. And so you need a product centric organizational structure where you're orchestrated around product, not siloed into IT and business and marketing. So product-centric structure, you need an agile Scrum process that you're able to use product management, product design, software engineering in the process. That's just the basis of building things. And then you need to put in the tooling, and that's a lot of what Roman was talking about. And how do you actually make data self-service? How do you implement the right tooling for both delivery as well as access to data, microservices, whatever you need to kind of build out as a stack to support those types of behaviors. And then if you get those three things in place, the people, the process, and the tooling, you will have an organization that is nimble, that's able to respond to market, that's able to respond to customers, that is insightful and empathetic, and so on and so forth. So that's my observation.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I just think when I look at all of the data that as a product manager that is used to improve your product, I think that the customer service data is a very critical component to that, and often that's just left over to the IT department or the business department. Like, okay, that's customer service, and I think the asset I would have is from a product side. Look at how you can bring that data into your product development. Bring in the experience, bring in the data so it is in app, and make customer service part of the product. You will receive that data and you'll be able to use that data to deliver a better product. And that's really what I would look at. And of course, we have great, a lot of people who can help you do that. One of the things that we would do is we could actually do some analysis on your existing customer service to help you understand that. So that's what I would do if I was making a recommendation to a product person, is bring customer service and make it part of your product.
This is great. You mentioned it so many times, user experience and customer service and the importance. This is a great takeaway. And Roman.
Yeah, I believe that for any technology to become truly transformative, it has to become invisible. And what I mean by that, your Delta example, that's the best example. The fact that you didn't need to go to some spreadsheet and type your number and so on, the fact that they were able to connect your phone number with service and so on. And that's the goal. At this moment, maybe 5% of anyone in a company can use data today. And for that number to get to 100%, data has to become pervasive and invisible. And that's the goal.
Thank you. Yes, I still remember the Delta example. It was fantastic. Well, with that said, I'd like to thank you all. This was a great session. It was short. I can stay here and talk way more about this, but I really appreciate it. I encourage everyone that's listening to us to connect with you, connect with me. Happy to take this conversation offline. So thank you all so much, and let's proceed with ProductCon.
Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.